She was 45 years old when she decided to disappear. Not the kind of disappearing where someone might find you eventually, the kind where you walk until the world forgets your name. Evelyn Carter had nothing left except the clothes on her back and a rage so deep it burned hotter than fear. 3 weeks crossing Wyoming on foot would either kill her or remake her. She didn't care which. This is the story of a woman who refused to break. If you're watching from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far Evelyn's journey reaches. And hit that like button if you believe second chances are earned, not given. The wind cut across the plains like a blade made of ice and dust. Evelyn Carter stopped walking only because her legs threatened to give out completely. She'd been moving since dawn. Hell, she'd been moving for 22 days straight, and every step felt like her bones were grinding against each other. Her boots, stolen from a donation bin outside a church in some town whose name she'd already forgotten, had worn through at the heel. She could feel every rock, every thorn, every unforgiving inch of Wyoming pressing up through the soul. The ranch appeared in the distance like a mirage. At first, she thought it was just another trick of exhaustion. The plains did that sometimes, showed you what you wanted to see right before they killed you. But as she got closer, the shape solidified into something real. A main house, weathered but standing. A barn that had seen better decades. Fencing that stretched out in crooked lines across the valley. Smoke rising from a chimney. Someone lived here. Evelyn's throat was so dry she could barely swallow. Her canteen had been empty since yesterday. She'd tried chewing on prairie grass just to get some moisture, but it only made things worse. Now, standing at the edge of this property, she had a choice to make. Keep walking and probably die somewhere between here and the next town, or knock on that door and face whatever came next. She chose the door. The walk up the dirt path felt longer than the entire morning's journey. Her reflection caught in a window as she passed. Christ, she looked like something dragged behind a wagon. Her hair, once kept neat in a tight bun, hung in matted strings around her face. Her dress, the only one she owned, was torn at the hem and stained with God knows what. Dirt, blood, sweat, the trifecta of survival. She raised her hand to knock. The door opened before her knuckles touched wood. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered, somewhere in his late 40s or early 50s. His face had the kind of weathering that came from years of sun and wind, deep lines around his eyes and mouth. He wore work clothes, denim and flannel, boots caked with mud. His hair was dark with threads of silver, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. Those eyes took her in with one quick, assessing sweep. "You lost?" His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "No." Evelyn's own voice came out as a rasp. "I'm looking for work." Something shifted in his expression, not quite surprised, but close. "Work. Yes? You got a name?" Evelyn Carter. He studied her for a long moment. She held his gaze, refusing to look away even though every instinct screamed at her to show deference, to make herself smaller. She'd spent too many years doing that already. "Caleb Boone," he said finally. "This is my ranch. I can cook, clean, mend. I can work." She paused. "I don't need much. Just food and a place to sleep." "You running from something?" The question hit like a fist. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "Might." "I'm running to something," she said. That's what matters." Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was something in them that hadn't been there before. Recognition, maybe. Or understanding. He stepped back from the doorway. "You look about ready to collapse. Come inside." She wanted to refuse, wanted to stay standing, stay strong, but her body had other ideas. The moment she crossed the threshold, her knees buckled. Caleb caught her before she hit the floor, his grip firm but not rough. "Easy." "I'm fine," she muttered, even as black spots danced across her vision. "Sure you are." He guided her to a chair at the kitchen table. "Sit." She sat because she didn't have a choice. Her body was staging a full rebellion. Caleb moved to the sink, pumped water into a tin cup, and brought it to her. Slow. Evelyn took the cup with shaking hands and forced herself to sip instead of gulp. The water was cold, clean, the best thing she'd ever tasted. She wanted to drain it, wanted to ask for more, but she made herself go slow. Desperation was weakness, and she couldn't afford weakness. When she looked up, Caleb was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, watching her. When's the last time you ate? 2 days ago. The lie came easily. It had been 4. Jesus. He turned to the stove where a pot was simmering. You got family around here? No. Friends? No. He ladled soup into a bowl, real soup with chunks of meat and vegetables, and set it in front of her with a spoon. Eat. Evelyn stared at the bowl, her stomach cramped with hunger, but her pride cramped harder. I don't take charity. It's not charity. You said you want to work. Caleb pulled out the chair across from her and sat. Can't work if you're half dead, so eat, and then we'll talk. She picked up the spoon. The soup was simple, nothing fancy, but it might as well have been a feast. She ate slowly, mechanically, aware of Caleb's eyes on her the whole time. When she finished, she set the spoon down carefully. Thank you. You're welcome. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Now, you want to tell me what you're really doing out here? I told you, I need work. Woman doesn't walk across Wyoming alone just for work. Especially not… He trailed off. Especially not what? Especially not at my age? Evelyn's voice sharpened. I'm 45, Mr. Boone, not dead. Wasn't going to say that. Then what were you going to say? He met her eyes steadily. Especially not looking like someone's been chasing her. The air between them went tight. Evelyn didn't blink. No one's chasing me. But you're running. I'm walking. Semantics. She stood, the chair scraping against the floor. Thank you for the water and the soup. I'll be on my way. Sit down. Excuse me. I said sit down. Caleb's voice wasn't loud, but it had weight. I'm not turning you out, just trying to understand what I'm dealing with. You're not dealing with anything. I asked for work. If you don't have any, I'll move on. I've got work. He gestured to the chair. Sit. Please. That last word, please, was what did it. Evelyn sat. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking tired. I'm not trying to interrogate you, but if you're going to be here, I need to know you're not bringing trouble to my door. I'm not. You sure about that? Evelyn thought about the last place she'd been. The house on Maple Street with its suffocating wallpaper and locked doors. The man her late husband's brother had tried to force her to marry. A widower looking for a housekeeper he could control. The night she'd climbed out the window with nothing but the clothes on her back. I'm sure, she said quietly. Caleb studied her for another long moment, then nodded. All right, I'll take your word for it. So you have work? Maybe. He leaned back in his chair. What exactly can you do? I told you, cook, clean, mend. I've got hands who handle most of that. What I need… He paused, choosing his words carefully. What I need is someone who can manage a household. Someone with a head for organization, who can keep things running smooth. Evelyn blinked. You're offering me a position as a housekeeper? Not exactly. Caleb stood, walked to the window, looked out at his land. My wife died 3 years ago. Since then, this place has been functional. Barely. The hands do their jobs, but nobody's really keeping things together. The house is a mess. Supplies get ordered wrong. Schedules fall apart. He turned back to her. I don't need someone to scrub floors. I need someone who can run things, make decisions, keep this operation from falling into chaos. His eyes locked on hers. Think you can do that? Something fierce and bright ignited in Evelyn's chest. Yes, she said without hesitation. It won't be easy. The men here are rough, and some of them won't take kindly to a woman telling them what to do. I've handled worse. I believe you. Caleb crossed his arms. Room and board plus wages, fair wages, not charity. You'll eat with everyone else, sleep in the spare room off the kitchen. You'll work hard and I'll expect results. When do I start? The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Soon as you're able. I'm able now. You can barely stand. I'm standing, aren't I? This time he did smile, just a little. Yeah, you are. He extended his hand. We got a deal, Mrs. Carter? She shook his hand. His grip was calloused, strong, but he didn't squeeze too hard. We have a deal. And it's Miss Carter now. Miss Carter, then. He released her hand. Come on, I'll show you your room. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk for storage. A window looked out over the eastern fields. Evelyn stood in the doorway, taking it in. It's not much, Caleb said. It's mine? It's yours. She stepped inside, ran her hand along the iron bed frame. A room of her own. A door she could close. A lock she could turn from the inside. Thank you, she said, and meant it. Caleb nodded. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. He left, closing the door behind him. Evelyn waited until his footsteps faded. Then she sat on the bed. The mattress was thin, but better than the ground she'd been sleeping on for 3 weeks. She unlaced her ruined boots, peeled them off her blistered feet. And then for the first time since she'd climbed out that window, she let herself cry. Not from sadness, from relief, from exhaustion, from the sheer overwhelming weight of having made it this far. She cried silently, shoulders shaking, hands pressed to her mouth. When the tears finally stopped, she lay down on the bed fully clothed and fell into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. She woke to voices. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then it came back. The ranch, Caleb, the deal they'd made. She sat up, wincing at the stiffness in every muscle. Gray light filtered through the window. Dawn, maybe. The voices were coming from outside, men's voices, rough and loud. Evelyn stood, smoothed her dress as best she could, and went to investigate. The kitchen was empty, but the front door stood open. She stepped onto the porch. 6 men stood in the yard, all of them looking toward the barn. They were ranch hands, clearly, dressed for hard work, faces weathered. One of them noticed her and elbowed the man next to him. The conversations died. Evelyn stood perfectly still as 6 pairs of eyes turned her way. Well, hell, one of them said. He was young, maybe 25, with a cocky grin. Who's this? None of your business, Miller. Caleb's voice cut across the yard. He emerged from the barn, carrying a saddle. Get back to work. Just curious, boss. Miller's grin didn't fade. You didn't mention hiring new help. Didn't realize I needed your permission. The other men chuckled. Miller's grin slipped a little. Caleb walked past them to the porch, set the saddle down, and turned to face his crew. This is Miss Carter. She's going to be managing the household from now on. You'll treat her with respect, or you'll find work elsewhere. Clear? There was a beat of silence. Clear, an older man said. He had gray in his beard and a scar across his cheek. Name's Dutch, ma'am. Mr. Dutch, Evelyn said with a small nod. Just Dutch. The others introduced themselves. Miller, who was still smirking, a quiet man named Santos, 2 brothers called Jim and Wesley, and a kid who looked barely 18 named Aaron. All right, Caleb said. Everyone's got jobs. Do them. The men dispersed, though Evelyn could feel their eyes on her as they went. Miller threw her one last look over his shoulder, something assessing and not entirely friendly. When they were gone, Caleb turned to her. Sleep all right? Better than I have in weeks. Good. You hungry? Starving. He gestured toward the kitchen. Come on, I'll show you where everything is. The kitchen was functional but chaotic. Pots and pans were stacked haphazardly in the corner. The pantry was a disaster of half-empty sacks and unlabeled jars. The stove needed cleaning. Evelyn stood in the middle of it all, hands on her hips. I see what you mean, she said. Caleb looked almost embarrassed. Yeah, it's bad. It's manageable. She turned to him. But I'll need free rein. If I'm going to organize this place, I can't have people undermining me. You won't. Your men didn't look thrilled about my presence. They'll adjust. And if they don't, then they'll leave. Caleb met her eyes. I meant what I said. You're in charge of the household. That includes telling the men when and where to eat, making sure supplies are stocked, keeping schedules straight. They don't have to like it, but they will respect it. Evelyn nodded slowly. All right. I've got to ride out to check the north fence. You need anything before I go? Just information. How many men live here full time? 6, including me. Meals? Breakfast at dawn, lunch at noon, dinner at sundown. More or less. More or less, Evelyn repeated dryly. Yeah, it's been loose. I can see that. Supplies? There's a general store in town about 10 miles east. We usually send someone once a week. When's the last time someone went? Caleb thought about it. 2 weeks ago? Jesus Christ. Evelyn turned to the pantry, started pulling things out. All right, I'll make a list. Someone needs to go tomorrow. I'll send Dutch. Good. Caleb lingered in the doorway, watching her work. You really think you can whip this place into shape? Evelyn glanced at him over her shoulder. Mr. Boone, I've survived things that would break most people. A messy kitchen doesn't scare me. He smiled, a real smile this time. I believe that. After he left, Evelyn got to work. She started with the pantry, pulling everything out, wiping down the shelves, organizing what was salvageable and making a list of what needed replacing. Then she tackled the kitchen itself, scrubbing the stove, washing the pots, putting everything in its place. Her hands hurt. Her back ached. She didn't care. This was control. This was purpose. By midday, the kitchen looked like a different room. Dutch appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. Miss Carter? Yes? Just wanted to let you know, lunch is usually around now. Evelyn looked at the pot she'd put on the stove. Simple stew, made from what she'd found in the pantry. It'll be ready in 10 minutes. Yes, ma'am. He hesitated. Need any help? Can you set the table? Sure can. Dutch moved with surprising efficiency, pulling plates from the cupboard, laying out utensils. When the stew was ready, Evelyn ladled it into bowls while Dutch rang the bell outside. The men filed in, muddy and tired. They sat at the long table, eyeing the food with cautious approval. Miller was the last to enter. He took one look at the clean kitchen and whistled low. Well, damn. Didn't expect this. Language, Evelyn said mildly. Miller blinked. What? No swearing at the table. There was a beat of silence. Then Santos snorted, trying not to laugh. Miller's face reddened. I didn't mean, I know what you meant. Just keep it clean. Evelyn set a bowl in front of him. Eat. For a moment she thought he might argue, but then he picked up his spoon and dug in. The rest of the meal passed quietly. The men ate quickly, efficiently, then cleared their plates without being asked. Dutch caught her eye and gave a small nod of approval. When they were gone, Evelyn allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. First battle won. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Evelyn rose before dawn, started breakfast, woke the men with the bell. She cleaned, organized, planned. She rewrote the supply list 3 times before she was satisfied, sent Dutch to town with strict instructions. When he came back with everything she'd asked for, she felt another small victory. The men slowly warmed to her. Dutch was easy. He was old enough to appreciate order and good food. Santos was quiet but respectful. Jim and Wesley, the brothers, started calling her Miss Evie after the first week. Aaron, the kid, practically worshipped her after she mended his torn jacket without being asked. Miller was the holdout. He never openly defied her, but there was always an edge to his interactions. A smirk, a comment just shy of insubordinate. Evelyn ignored it mostly. She'd dealt with worse, but one afternoon, about 10 days after she'd arrived, things came to a head. She'd asked Miller to bring firewood to the kitchen. Simple task. He'd nodded, said he'd do it, then disappeared for 3 hours. When he finally showed up, the wood box was still empty. Evelyn found him in the barn, leaning against a post, chatting with Aaron. Mr. Miller. He looked up, grin in place. Miss Carter. The firewood? Oh, right. I'll get to it. You said that 3 hours ago. Yeah, well, I got busy. Aaron looked between them, then made himself scarce. Evelyn stepped closer. When I ask you to do something, I expect it done. Not eventually. Not when you feel like it. When I ask. Miller straightened, the grin fading. You're not my boss. Actually, I am, at least when it comes to household tasks. You're the housekeeper. I'm the person Mr. Boone put in charge. If you have a problem with that, take it up with him. Miller's jaw tightened. Maybe I will. Go ahead. They stared at each other. Then Caleb's voice cut through the tension. Problem here? Both of them turned. Caleb stood in the barn doorway. expression unreadable. No problem, Miller said quickly. Miss Carter? Evelyn kept her eyes on Miller. Mr. Miller was just about to bring firewood to the kitchen. That right? Caleb's tone was mild, but there was steel underneath. Miller hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, that's right. Good. Get to it. Miller grabbed an armful of wood and stalked past them. When he was gone, Caleb looked at Evelyn. He giving you trouble? Nothing I can't handle. I can handle it if you need me to. I don't. She met his eyes. But thank you. Caleb nodded slowly. You're tougher than you look. I've had to be. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or respect. Dinner ready soon? Caleb asked. Half an hour. I'll be there. He left, and Evelyn went back to the kitchen, where Miller had dumped the firewood in a sullen pile. She stacked it properly, then checked on the roast in the oven. Her hands were shaking slightly. She hated confrontation, always had, but she'd learned the hard way that backing down only made things worse. So she'd stood her ground, and Miller had blinked first. Another small victory. 3 weeks into her time at the ranch, Evelyn woke to the sound of shouting. She dressed quickly, hurried outside. The men were gathered near the corral, all of them yelling at once. In the center of the chaos, a horse was rearing and bucking, wild-eyed with panic. Caleb was trying to calm it, voice low and steady, but the horse wasn't having it. What happened? Evelyn asked Dutch. Damn thing got spooked by a rattlesnake, bolted, tangled itself in the fence. We got it free, but now it won't settle. The horse screamed, hooves lashing out. Caleb had to jump back to avoid getting kicked. Without thinking, Evelyn walked forward. Miss Carter, Dutch started. She ignored him. Easy, she said softly, approaching from the side. Easy now. The horse's ears flicked toward her. That's it, Evelyn murmured. No one's going to hurt you. She kept her movements slow, non-threatening. The horse stamped but didn't bolt. Miss Carter, you should, Caleb began. Shh. She was close enough now to touch it. She extended her hand, palm up, letting the horse catch her scent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the horse lowered its head, snuffled at her hand. There you go, Evelyn whispered. You're all right. She stroked its neck, slow and gentle. The horse's breathing evened out. Behind her, the men were silent. After a few minutes, the horse was calm enough for Caleb to take the reins. He led it carefully back to the stable while Evelyn stepped away. Dutch was staring at her. How the hell did you do that? Evelyn shrugged. My father kept horses. I grew up around them. You should have said something. You didn't ask. Caleb reappeared, brushing off his hands. That was... He trailed off, shook his head. That was something. The horse just needed someone to be calm. Most people wouldn't have had the guts to get that close. I'm not most people. Caleb's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something new in them. Not just respect. Interest. No, he said quietly. You're not. Come. That night, after dinner, Caleb asked her to join him on the porch. They sat in the 2 rocking chairs there, watching the sun set over the plains. The sky was streaked with orange and purple, the air finally cooling after a hot day. You settling in all right? Caleb asked. I am. Men treating you okay? Mostly. Miller still being a pain? He's learning, Caleb chuckled. I bet he is. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Can I ask you something? Caleb said. You can ask. Where'd you come from? Before here, I mean. Evelyn considered her answer carefully. East of here. A town I'd rather not name. Fair enough. He rocked slowly. You ever think about going back? No. The finality in her voice made him glance over. That bad. Worse. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm here now. Another silence, this one heavier. My wife, Caleb said suddenly. Sarah. She died giving birth. The baby didn't make it either. Evelyn's chest tightened. I'm so sorry. Oh, it's been 3 years, but sometimes it feels like yesterday. He stared out at the darkening sky. I loved her. Still do in a way. But life doesn't stop just because you're grieving. No, it doesn't. You ever been in love, Miss Carter? The question caught her off guard. Once. What happened? He died. The memory was old but still sharp. Fever took him. We'd only been married 2 years. Christ, how old were you? 23. And you never remarried? Evelyn's hands tightened on the armrests. There were circumstances. After he died, I had to live with his family. They had plans for me. What kind of plans? The kind that didn't involve me having a say. Understanding dawned in Caleb's eyes. That's what you were running from. Yes. They try to force you into something? They tried. Her voice hardened. I refused. So you left. So I left. Caleb nodded slowly. Took guts. Took desperation. Same thing sometimes. They rocked in silence as the stars began to appear. You're safe here, Caleb said finally. I want you to know that. Whatever you left behind, it's not going to find you. How can you be sure? Because I won't let it. The conviction in his voice made something in Evelyn's chest twist. Why? She asked. Why do you care? Caleb thought about it. Because you remind me that there's more to strength than muscle. You walked across Wyoming alone. You stood up to Miller. You calmed a panicked horse without blinking. He looked at her. That's not nothing. It feels like nothing most days. It's not. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They sat until full dark, then went inside to their separate rooms. But something had shifted between them. Something neither of them was quite ready to name. What? The first snow came early that year. Evelyn woke one morning to a world transformed, white and silent, the plains erased under a blanket of powder. She stood at the kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the flakes fall. Beautiful and dangerous. Winter on the Wyoming plains was nothing to take lightly. She'd heard stories, blizzards that lasted days, cold that could kill you in minutes if you weren't prepared. Caleb appeared beside her, his own coffee in hand. We need to stock up. Storm's coming. How can you tell? Sky, wind, the way the animals are acting. He took a sip. We've got maybe 2 days before it hits. What do you need me to do? Make sure we've got enough food to last a week, maybe longer. I'll take inventory. I'll send Dutch to town for anything we're short on. They worked through the day, preparing. Evelyn checked and rechecked the pantry, made lists, organized. Dutch made 2 trips to town, coming back with sacks of flour, salt pork, coffee, sugar. The men reinforced the barn, checked the fences, brought the cattle closer to the ranch. By nightfall, they were as ready as they could be. Evelyn stood on the porch, watching the horizon. The sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of snow. Caleb joined her. Nervous? Should I be? Maybe a little? I've survived worse. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He looked at her, something soft in his expression. I believe you. The first gust of wind hit like a fist, nearly knocking Evelyn off her feet. Caleb steadied her. Inside, he said. It's starting. They went in, and Caleb barred the door behind them. The storm hit an hour later. Wind howled around the house like a living thing, shaking the walls, rattling the windows. Snow fell so thick that Evelyn couldn't see the barn, couldn't see anything beyond the glass. The men gathered in the main room, playing cards, telling stories, trying not to look worried. Evelyn kept busy. She baked bread, made coffee, checked supplies, anything to keep her mind off the storm. Caleb found her in the kitchen late that night. You should rest. So should you. Can't. He leaned against the counter. Too wired. Worried? Always during storms like this. Lost 2 men to a blizzard 5 years ago. They went out to check on the cattle, got turned around in the white. We found them 3 days later. Evelyn's hands stilled. I'm sorry. It's the risk, but it doesn't make it easier. She poured him a fresh cup of coffee. Here. Thanks. He took it, their fingers brushing. Neither of them pulled away. Evelyn, he said quietly. It was the first time he'd used her first name. Yes? If something happens, if this storm gets worse, I need you to promise me something. What? Don't try to be a hero. Don't go out there. Stay inside. Stay safe. Stay.
Caleb, promise me. She met his eyes. I promise. He exhaled, relief clear on his face. Good. But even as she said it, Evelyn knew it was a promise she might not be able to keep.
The storm raged for 3 days. By the second day, they were running low on firewood. By the third, the men were getting restless, cooped up, and anxious. And then, just when Evelyn thought it might never end, the wind died. The silence was almost deafening. Caleb opened the door. Snow had drifted halfway up the frame, but beyond it the sky was clear. "It's over," he said. The men cheered, started pulling on coats and boots. "We need to check the cattle," Caleb said. "Dutch, Santos, Jim, you're with me. Wesley, Miller, Aaron, clear the paths." Everyone moved with purpose. Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching them go. The snow was deep, waist-high in some places. The world looked alien, every familiar landmark buried or transformed. And somewhere out there, the cattle were scattered. She thought about Caleb's promise, about staying inside, staying safe. But she also thought about the ranch, about the men risking their lives, about Caleb's face when he'd talked about losing people to the storm. She went to her room, pulled on her warmest clothes, and followed them outside. The cold hit her like a wall the moment she stepped outside. Evelyn had thought she understood cold, those nights sleeping rough on the prairie, the wind cutting through her threadbare dress. But this was different. This was cold that reached into your chest and squeezed, that made every breath feel like swallowing knives. Her eyes watered immediately, tears freezing on her cheeks. She pushed forward anyway. The men's tracks were visible in the snow, deep trenches leading toward the northern pasture. She followed them, her stolen boots sinking with each step. The world was nothing but white and silence, broken only by her labored breathing and the crunch of snow. It took her 20 minutes to realize she'd lost the trail. The tracks had been covered by fresh drift, or she'd taken a wrong turn, or both. Either way, she was alone in a landscape that all looked the same. Rolling white hills, a sky so bright it hurt to look at. For the first time since leaving the ranch house, fear crept in. She turned in a slow circle, trying to orient herself. The ranch should be behind her, or was it to the left? Everything looked identical. "Stupid," she muttered. "Stupid, stupid woman." But standing there wouldn't help. She picked a direction and kept walking. 10 minutes later, she heard voices. Relief flooded through her. She changed course, heading toward the sound. As she crested a small rise, she saw them. Caleb, Dutch, Santos, and Jim, all on horseback, trying to herd a cluster of cattle back toward the ranch. The cattle were panicked, eyes rolling white, bellowing their distress. Several had broken away from the group and were heading in the wrong direction, toward a line of rocks that jutted up through the snow. Caleb spotted her. Even from a distance, she could see his expression shift from concentration to shock to anger. He rode toward her, his horse plunging through the drifts. "What the hell are you doing out here?" His voice cut through the wind. "Helping. I told you to stay inside." "I know what you told me." His jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jump. "You could have gotten lost, frozen to death. Christ, Evelyn." "But I didn't." She met his eyes steadily. "I'm here. Put me to work or send me back, but stop wasting time yelling at me." For a moment she thought he might actually send her back. Then Dutch called out, "Boss, we're losing them." 3 more cattle had broken away, heading for the rocks. Caleb swore under his breath. "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Dutch, give her your horse." Dutch dismounted without hesitation, handed her the reins. The horse was a bay mare, older, steady. Evelyn grabbed the saddle horn and hauled herself up. Her legs screamed in protest. She hadn't ridden in years, but she got herself seated. "Stay with Santos," Caleb ordered. "Help him push the stragglers back to the main group. Don't do anything stupid." "Define stupid." "Evelyn, I've got it. Go." He looked like he wanted to argue more, but another bellow from the cattle made him wheel his horse around. He and Jim took off after the breakaways. Santos rode up beside her. He was younger than Dutch, maybe mid-30s, with dark eyes and a quiet competence about him. "You really know how to ride?"
I'm not going to fall off if that's what you're asking. The corner of his mouth twitched. Good enough. Come on. They worked together, circling around the scattered cattle, using their horses to push them back toward the main herd. It was harder than it looked. The cows were stubborn, frightened, determined to go anywhere but where they were supposed to. Evelyn's hands were numb inside her gloves, her face so cold she couldn't feel it. But she kept going. Santos called out instructions, his voice calm and clear. She followed his lead, positioning her horse to block escape routes, making herself big and loud when a cow tried to bolt. Slowly, painfully, they got the stragglers moving. Caleb and Jim returned with the breakaways just as Santos and Evelyn pushed the last of their group into the main herd. Caleb's expression was still hard, but there was something else there too. Something that might have been grudging respect. Let's get them home, he said. The journey back to the ranch took over an hour. The cattle moved slowly, reluctantly, stopping every few minutes to bellow their complaints. Evelyn's thighs burned from gripping the saddle, her back ached, and she was pretty sure she'd lost all feeling in her toes. She didn't complain. When the barn finally came into view, she could have cried with relief. They got the cattle penned, gave them hay and water. The men dismounted, started unsaddling horses, moving with the exhaustion of people who'd pushed too hard for too long. Evelyn slid off her horse and immediately stumbled. Her legs had turned to jelly. Caleb caught her elbow. Easy. I'm fine. You're shaking. So are you. He was. They all were. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving nothing but bone-deep cold and fatigue. Dutch appeared with blankets, started handing them out. Evelyn wrapped hers around her shoulders, teeth chattering. Inside, Caleb said. Everyone inside. Now. They trudged to the house like a line of frozen ghosts. Inside, the fire was still burning. Wesley had kept it going, and the warmth hit like a physical force. Evelyn's face tingled painfully as it thawed. Coffee, she managed. I'll make coffee. You'll sit down, Caleb said. Wesley, get the coffee going. Santos, stoke the fire. Everyone else, get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia. Nobody argued. Evelyn sank into a chair at the kitchen table, her legs refusing to hold her anymore. She fumbled with the buttons on her coat, but her fingers wouldn't cooperate. Caleb knelt in front of her. Let me. I can do it. Evelyn? His voice was gentle. Let me. She dropped her hands. He unbuttoned her coat carefully, helped her shrug out of it. Then he pulled off her gloves, his expression darkening when he saw her hands. The skin was red, almost white in places. The fingers stiff. Frostbite? She asked. Maybe. Not bad, but close. He rubbed her hands between his, trying to warm them. What the hell were you thinking? That you needed help. I needed you safe. Same thing. It's not. He looked up at her, and there was something raw in his eyes. If something had happened to you out there. But it didn't. It could have. Caleb. She waited until he met her eyes. I made a choice. Same as you do every time you go out in weather like this. Don't ask me to sit inside while everyone else takes risks. That's different. How? Because... He trailed off, jaw working. Because what? Because I'm a woman? Because I'm older? Because I've only been here a month? Her voice sharpened. I'm not fragile. I'm not some delicate thing that needs protecting. I can pull my weight. I know you can. The words came out rough. That's what scares me. Before she could respond, Wesley appeared with coffee. The moment broke. Caleb stood, took a cup, pressed it into her hands. Drink. She drank. The men gathered around the fire, peeling off wet layers, accepting coffee from Wesley. Their faces were wind-burned, lips cracked, eyes red-rimmed. But they were alive. All of them. Dutch raised his cup in a toast. To Miss Evelyn, who apparently doesn't know the meaning of stay inside. The others laughed, raised their own cups. Even Miller, who'd stayed behind to clear paths, cracked a smile. Heard you kept up with Santos. That's saying something. I had a good teacher. She nodded at Santos, who ducked his head modestly. You did good, Santos said. Real good. Warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee spread through her chest. Caleb cleared his throat. Everyone all right? No injuries? A round of shaken heads. Good. Get warm, get food, get rest. We'll assess damage in the morning.
The men dispersed slowly, heading to their bunks. Evelyn stayed at the table, cradling her coffee, watching the fire. Caleb sat down across from her. "You mad at me?" she asked. "Yes." "You going to send me away?" "No." "Good." They sat in silence for a while. "My wife," Caleb said eventually. "Sarah. She was like you in some ways, stubborn, brave, didn't know when to quit." He stared into his cup. "I loved that about her, and it terrified me." Evelyn waited. "I couldn't protect her when it mattered. When she was in labor, when things went wrong." His voice cracked. "I was useless. Just standing there while she died." "Caleb, I know it's not rational. I know you're not her. But when I saw you out there in the snow, all I could think was that I'd lose someone else. He stopped abruptly. The air went tight. "Someone you what?" Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. He met her eyes. "Someone I'm starting to care about." Her breath caught. "I know it's too soon," he continued. "I know you probably don't feel the same. Hell, I don't even know if I'm ready for this. But I can't pretend it's not happening." Evelyn set down her cup carefully. Her hands were still shaking, but not from the cold. "I'm scared too," she admitted. "The last time I let myself care about someone, he died. And after that, I learned it was safer not to care at all. Safer not to want anything, not to hope for anything. But being safe is its own kind of death." She looked at him. "I didn't walk across Wyoming just to hide for the rest of my life." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Hope, maybe, or possibility. "So what do we do?" he asked. "I don't know." She smiled slightly. "Maybe we figure it out as we go." He smiled back. "Yeah, maybe we do." They sat together as the fire burned low and the house settled into quiet. Outside, the snow reflected moonlight, turning everything silver and strange. Inside, something new was beginning, something neither of them had planned for, something that felt dangerous and right in equal measure. The next morning dawned clear and brutally cold. Evelyn woke to find ice crystals on the inside of her window, her breath visible in the air. She dressed quickly, layered everything she owned, and went to start breakfast. The men appeared one by one, moving stiffly, complaining about aches and pains. Even Dutch, who never complained about anything, admitted his back was giving him hell. "We're getting too old for this," he muttered, accepting coffee from Evelyn. "Speak for yourself," Jim said, then winced as he sat down. "Okay, maybe you're right." They ate quickly, biscuits and gravy, eggs, bacon, and headed out to assess the damage. Evelyn worked through the morning, restocking supplies, mending torn clothes, keeping the fire going. Around noon, Caleb came back looking grim. "Lost 6 head," he said. "Found them in a ravine. Must have fallen during the storm." "I'm sorry." "Could have been worse." He pulled off his gloves, held his hands to the fire. "But it's still a hit." "What can I do?" "Not much right now. Just keep things running here. I need to ride out again, check the rest of the herd." "Be careful." He looked at her, and something warm passed between them. "Always am." After he left, Evelyn threw herself into work. She reorganized the pantry again, took inventory of medical supplies, mended a torn saddle blanket, anything to keep busy, to not think about Caleb out in the cold. Miller found her in the barn that afternoon, struggling to move a heavy sack of grain. "Need help?" he asked. She looked up, surprised. Miller offering help voluntarily was new. "Yes, actually, thank you." He hefted the sack easily, carried it to where she pointed. When he set it down, he didn't immediately leave. "Look," he said, "I owe you an apology." Evelyn blinked. "For what?" "For being a jackass when you first got here. For pushing back, for making things harder than they needed to be." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You've proven yourself 10 times over, and yesterday, going out in the storm, that took guts." "I was just doing what needed doing." "Yeah, well, not everyone would have." He extended his hand. "Fresh start?" She shook it. "Fresh start." After he left, Evelyn allowed herself a small smile. Another wall down.
Another battle won.
That night, over dinner, Dutch announced he'd be heading to town in the morning for supplies. "Weather's clear enough," he said, "and we're low on a few things." "I'll make a list," Evelyn said. "Already figured you would." Dutch grinned. "Anything special you need?" She thought about it. "Coffee. We're going through it faster than I expected." "Ain't that the truth?" Wesley said. "Your coffee's about the only thing getting me up in the mornings." "High praise," Santos said dryly. "I mean it. Before Miss Evelyn got here, we were drinking Dutch's coffee, and that stuff could strip paint." Dutch threw a biscuit at him. Wesley caught it, took a bite. The table erupted in laughter, and Evelyn felt something warm settle in her chest. This feeling of belonging, of being part of something. She'd almost forgotten what it felt like. Later, after the dishes were done and the men had retreated to their bunks, Caleb found her on the porch again. She'd taken to coming out here at night, despite the cold, just to look at the stars. "You're going to freeze," he said, handing her a blanket. "I'm fine." "Course you are," but he draped the blanket over her shoulders anyway. They stood side by side, looking out at the snow-covered plains. The moon was nearly full, bright enough to read by. "Dutch is going to town tomorrow," Caleb said. "I know, I gave him a list." "You should go with him." Evelyn turned to look at him. "Why?" "Because you haven't been off this ranch since you got here. Might do you good to see civilization, such as it is." I know you don't need it. I'm saying you should do it anyway." He met her eyes. "Take a break, Evelyn. You've earned it." She wanted to argue, but the thought of a few hours away, of seeing something other than snow and cattle, was appealing. "All right," she said. "I'll go." "Good." They stood in comfortable silence for a while longer. "Caleb," Evelyn said eventually, "what you said last night about caring, yeah? I want you to know I heard you, and I'm not running away from it." He looked at her, something soft and vulnerable in his expression. "No?" "No. But I'm also not rushing into anything. I've made that mistake before." "Fair enough. So we take it slow." "Slow. I can do slow." "Good." But when his hand found hers in the darkness, she didn't pull away. And when his thumb traced small circles on her palm, she let herself lean just slightly closer. Slow didn't mean stopping, it just meant being careful, being sure. The ride to town the next morning was cold but clear. Evelyn sat beside Dutch on the wagon seat, wrapped in blankets, watching the landscape roll by. It felt strange to be moving again, to be seeing new things after weeks in the same place. Dutch was good company, quiet when she wanted quiet, talkative when she wanted distraction. He told her stories about the early days of the ranch, about Caleb's wife Sarah, about the hard winters and the good years. "Boss is different since you came," he said as they neared town. "Different how?" "Lighter, maybe. Like he's got something to look forward to again." Dutch glanced at her. "That's a good thing, in case you're wondering." "I wasn't sure." "Well, now you are." The town was small, a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, a handful of houses, but after weeks of seeing only the ranch, it felt almost overwhelming. Dutch pulled up in front of the general store. "Take your time. I've got a few errands to run. Meet you back here in an hour?" "Sounds good." Evelyn climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from the ride. The store's door opened with a cheerful jingle. Inside it was warm and cluttered, packed with everything from bolts of fabric to farm equipment. An older woman stood behind the counter, gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. "Help you?" she asked. "I have a list." Evelyn pulled it from her pocket. The woman, Mrs. Henderson, according to the sign, took the list, looked it over. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You're from the Boone Ranch." It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." "You the new housekeeper everyone's talking about?" Evelyn's stomach tightened. "I suppose I am." Mrs. Henderson's expression was unreadable. "Heard you're living out there. Just you and all those men." "That's right." The woman started gathering items from the list. "Folks have been talking." "I'm sure they have." "Not all of it kind." Evelyn met her eyes steadily. I can't control what people say. No, but you can control what you do. Mrs. Henderson set a sack of coffee on the counter. Caleb Boone's a good man, lost a lot when Sarah died. He doesn't need more heartache. I have no intention of causing him heartache. Intention doesn't always match outcome. Mrs. Henderson, Evelyn said carefully, I appreciate your concern for Mr. Boone, but my arrangement with him is between us. I'm working for him, nothing more. The lie tasted bitter, but what else could she say? Mrs. Henderson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Fair enough, just be careful. This is a small town. People notice things, people judge. Let them. Something like approval flickered in the older woman's eyes. You got spine. I'll give you that. The rest of the transaction was businesslike. Evelyn paid, helped load the supplies into crates. She was carrying one outside when she heard voices. That's her. The one living at Boone's place? Must be. Look at her. She's not exactly young, is she? Evelyn kept walking, jaw tight. Heard she just showed up one day. No references, no nothing. Caleb's out of his mind, taking in some vagrant woman. My husband says she's probably running from the law. Evelyn set the crate in the wagon with more force than necessary. The women, 3 of them, standing outside the church, fell silent. She turned to face them. They were younger than her, dressed in their Sunday best despite it being Tuesday. Their faces showed a mix of curiosity and disdain. Ladies, Evelyn said evenly. We didn't mean, one of them started. Yes, you did. Evelyn stepped forward. But let me save you the trouble of speculation. My name is Evelyn Carter. I work for Mr. Boone, managing his household. I'm not running from the law. I'm not a vagrant. And what Mr. Boone chooses to do with his ranch and his life is his business, not yours. The women stared at her. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. She turned and walked back into the store. Her hands were shaking. Dutch appeared a few minutes later, took one look at her face and asked, What happened? Nothing, just the local welcoming committee. Ah. Understanding crossed his features. Don't let them get to you. Small-town folk always got opinions. I don't care about their opinions. Good, because they don't matter. They finished loading the wagon in silence. As they pulled away from town, Evelyn looked back once. The 3 women were still standing there, watching. Let them watch. She'd survived worse than gossip. The ride back was quiet. Dutch didn't push, for which Evelyn was grateful. She needed time to process, to let her anger cool. By the time the ranch came into view, she'd mostly succeeded. Caleb was in the yard when they arrived, working with one of the horses. He looked up, smiled when he saw her. How was town? Educational, she said dryly. His smile faded. What happened? Nothing I couldn't handle. But Dutch, climbing down from the wagon, said, Town ladies gave her a hard time. Caleb's expression darkened. What did they say? It doesn't matter. Evelyn, Caleb, she met his eyes. I knew what I was signing up for when I took this job. I knew people would talk. I don't care. I care. Then don't. I can fight my own battles. He looked like he wanted to argue, but Miller called out from the barn something about a broken gate, and the moment passed. That evening, the ranch hands were more subdued than usual. Word of what had happened in town had spread. Evelyn suspected Dutch had said something, and the men kept glancing at her, expressions uncertain. Finally, Aaron spoke up. Miss Evelyn? Yes? For what it's worth, we're glad you're here. All of us. The others nodded, even Miller. This place runs better with you in charge, Wesley added. Food's better, house is cleaner, and you don't take any of our nonsense. High praise, Evelyn said, echoing Santos's words from the night before. They laughed, and the tension broke. Later, much later, after everyone had gone to bed, Evelyn stood at her window looking out at the dark plains. She thought about the women in town, their whispers and judgments. She thought about Caleb, about the way he'd looked at her when she'd said she could fight her own battles. She thought about this ranch, this place that had become something like home in just over a month. And she realized something. She wasn't running anymore. She was standing her ground. Whatever came next, gossip, winter, the slow, careful dance between her and Caleb, she would face it. Not because she had no other choice, but because she'd chosen this. Chosen him. Chosen herself. A knock at her door made her turn. "It's me," Caleb's voice low. She opened the door. He stood there in the dim hallway, hair mussed, shirt untucked. "Couldn't sleep." "Me either." "Can I come in?" She hesitated, then stepped back. He entered, closed the door behind him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. "What those women said," he began. "I told you, it doesn't matter." "It matters to me." He moved closer. "Evelyn, I don't give a damn what this town thinks, but I need you to know, if being here working for me, if that's causing you trouble, stop." She reached up, pressed her fingers to his lips. "I'm exactly where I want to be." His eyes searched hers. "You sure?" "I'm sure." He caught her hand, held it against his chest. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady. "I'm falling for you," he said quietly. "I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but I can't help it. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." But Evelyn found she did have something to say. "I'm falling too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." "Yeah." He smiled slightly. "Me too." They stood there, hands clasped, hearts open, and outside the Wyoming winter pressed close around them, cold and unforgiving. But inside, something warm was growing, something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. The morning Caleb left her room, the sky was still dark. He paused at the door, looked back at her sitting on the edge of the bed, and said, "We should probably talk about this." "Probably," Evelyn agreed, "but not now." "No, not now." He smiled, tired but genuine, and slipped out into the hallway. Evelyn sat for a long moment, hands folded in her lap, trying to sort through what she was feeling. Fear, yes, but also something lighter, something that felt dangerously close to happiness. She stood, dressed, and went to start breakfast before anyone else woke. The routine helped. Measure the coffee, heat the griddle, slice the bacon. Simple tasks that required her hands, but not her heart. By the time the men started filtering in, she had her composure back. Dutch gave her a knowing look but said nothing. Santos poured coffee in silence. Miller actually said good morning without his usual edge of sarcasm. Caleb was the last to arrive. Their eyes met across the kitchen, held for just a second longer than necessary. Then he took his seat at the table like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The days that followed fell into a new pattern. On the surface, life at the ranch continued as before. Evelyn managed the household, the men worked the land, Caleb ran the operation. But underneath, there were stolen moments. A hand brushing hers when he passed her a plate. The way he found reasons to come to the kitchen when the others were occupied. Late-night conversations on the porch that lasted until their breath turned to fog and the cold drove them inside. They were careful. The men suspected something. Evelyn was sure of it, but nobody said anything. Either they approved or they were too smart to interfere. 2 weeks after the first storm, the weather turned again. Evelyn woke to find the world gray, the air heavy with the promise of snow. She stood at the kitchen window, watching clouds pile up on the horizon like mountains. "Another one coming," Dutch said from behind her. She jumped. "You move too quiet for a man your size." "Sorry." He came to stand beside her. "Boss says this one's going to be bad, worse than the last." "How can he tell?" "Years of watching the sky. The animals know too. Horses are restless, cattle are bunching up." Dutch turned to her. "We'll need to bring everything in close. Make sure nothing's left out that could get buried. I'll make sure the house is ready." "I know you will." He paused. "Miss Evelyn, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "You and the boss, that's a good thing, right? You're not going to hurt him?" The question caught her off guard. "I don't plan to." Plans and outcomes aren't always the same. It was almost exactly what Mrs. Henderson had said. Evelyn sighed. "Dutch, I care about Caleb. More than I expected to, more than I probably should. But I'm not Sarah. I can't replace her, and I'm not trying to." "I know that. But does he?" She didn't have an answer. Dutch squeezed her shoulder gently. Just be patient with him. He's been alone a long time. Alone even when Sarah was alive, if you know what I mean. I don't understand. She was a good woman, but she was fragile, always sick, always needing care. Caleb spent 3 years being strong for her, never letting himself break. Dutch's voice was quiet. He needs someone he doesn't have to be strong for. Someone who can be strong with him. Evelyn's throat tightened. I can do that. I believe you can. The storm hit that afternoon. It came fast, a wall of wind and snow that turned the world white in minutes. The men scrambled to secure everything, moving with practiced urgency. Evelyn watched from the window as they fought against the wind, their figures barely visible through the blowing snow. Caleb was the last one in. Snow clung to his coat, his hat, his eyebrows. He stamped his feet, shook himself like a dog. Everyone accounted for? Evelyn asked. Everyone's safe. He pulled off his gloves, held his hands to the fire. But we've got a problem. What kind of problem? Cattle scattered before we could get them all in. Some of them headed toward the ravine. Evelyn's stomach dropped. The same ravine where we lost the 6 head? Yeah. How many are out there? Maybe 20, could be more. Caleb ran a hand through his wet hair. If they go over that edge, he didn't need to finish. They both knew what would happen. So what do we do? Evelyn asked. Wait it out. Can't do anything until the storm passes. But the storm didn't pass. It raged through the night, grew stronger the next day. By the second morning, the snow was so deep that opening the front door required shoveling. The men were restless, pacing like caged animals. We're losing them, Jim said, staring out the window. Every hour we wait, they're getting closer to that ravine. We can't ride out in this, Caleb said. We'd be dead before we got 50 yards. So we just let them die? We don't have a choice. But Jim was right. Evelyn could see it in Caleb's face, the way his jaw was clenched, the tight line of his shoulders. Every lost cow was money they couldn't afford to lose. More than that, it was failure. And Caleb Boone didn't accept failure easily. That night, the wind changed. It didn't stop, but it shifted direction, and the snow fell straighter instead of sideways. Caleb stood at the window for a long time, then turned to face his men. It's not much, but it's better than it's been. We ride at first light. Boss, are you sure, Dutch started. I'm sure. We take the strongest horses, we stick together, and we bring those cattle back. I'm going with you, Evelyn said. Every head turned toward her. Absolutely not, Caleb said. You need all the help you can get. And if something happens to you, if you get hurt or lost or... I could say the same to you. Evelyn crossed her arms. I can ride. I proved that last time. You need every able body, and I'm able. Evelyn, I'm going. They stared at each other across the room, and Evelyn could see the war happening behind his eyes, fear and practicality, protection and respect. Finally, Santos spoke up. She's right, boss. We could use another rider. Miller nodded. She kept up last time. Caleb looked around at his men, then back at Evelyn. If you go, you follow orders. No arguments, no heroics. Clear? Clear. I mean it. If I tell you to do something, you do it. I don't care if you think you know better. I understand. He held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded curtly. Everyone gets some rest. We leave at dawn. The men dispersed. Evelyn started to follow, but Caleb caught her arm. Can I talk to you, alone? They went to his office, a small room off the main house that Evelyn rarely entered. It was sparse, functional, with a desk covered in papers and a map of the ranch on the wall. Caleb closed the door, leaned against it. I can't talk you out of this? No. Didn't think so. He crossed to her, took her hands. Evelyn, I need you to understand something. If we get out there and things go bad, I will choose you over the cattle. Every time, without hesitation. Caleb, let me finish. His grip tightened. I know that's not what you want to hear. I know you want to be treated like everyone else, but I can't do that. I won't. So if it comes down to saving you or saving the herd, I'm saving you. And I need to know you won't fight me on that. Evelyn's chest felt tight. That's not fair to the others. I don't care. You should. But I don't. He pulled her closer. I've lost too much already. I can't lose you too. You barely know me.
I know enough. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being irrational, that she wasn't worth more than his livelihood or his men's safety. But the look in his eyes stopped her. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. He exhaled, relief washing over his face. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her mouth. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Evelyn said, "We should get some sleep." Yeah, but he didn't let go of her hands. Stay with me tonight? Caleb, the men... Don't care about the men. I don't want to be alone. Neither did she. They went to his room together, climbed into his bed fully clothed, and held each other in the darkness. Evelyn listened to his heartbeat, felt the rise and fall of his chest, and tried not to think about what tomorrow might bring. Dawn came too soon. Evelyn woke to Caleb kissing her forehead, already dressed. Time to go. She got up, put on every warm layer she owned, and met the men in the barn. They were saddling horses in grim silence, their faces set with determination. Dutch handed her the reins to the bay mare from before. She's steady. Trust her. I will. They mounted up. 6 riders total: Caleb, Dutch, Santos, Jim, Miller, and Evelyn. Wesley and Aaron stayed behind to watch the ranch. The storm had passed, but its aftermath was brutal. Snow came up to the horses' chests in places, forcing them to fight for every step. The wind was still strong, cutting through their clothes like knives. They rode in single file, Caleb in the lead, following the direction the cattle had gone. It was slow going, exhausting for both horse and rider. Evelyn's thighs burned within the first mile. Her hands ached from gripping the reins, but she kept her mouth shut and pushed on. After an hour, they found the first group of cattle, 5 cows, huddled together in the shelter of some rocks, looking miserable but alive. Jim and Miller peeled off to herd them back toward the ranch while the rest continued on. The ravine loomed ahead, a jagged scar in the white landscape. Caleb held up a hand, signaling them to stop. Careful from here, he called back. The edge is hidden under the snow. One wrong step and you're over. They dismounted, led the horses on foot. Evelyn's heart was pounding. The ground beneath her feet felt treacherous, unstable. She could hear the wind howling through the ravine, a sound like the earth itself moaning. Then she heard the cattle. The bellowing came from somewhere to the left, desperate and frightened. Caleb motioned for them to spread out, search along the edge. Evelyn moved carefully, testing each step before putting her full weight down. The snow was deep here, untouched, and she had no way of knowing where solid ground ended and the ravine began. Over here! Santos's voice cut through the wind. They converged on his position. Below them, maybe 15 feet down on a ledge, were 12 cattle. They'd gone over the edge but gotten stuck partway down, trapped on a narrow shelf of rock. Christ, Dutch breathed. How do we get them up? Caleb studied the situation, his face grim. We can't pull them. The ledge is too narrow. We'd have to go down, lead them up one at a time. That ledge won't hold a man and a cow, Santos said. No, but it might hold just a man. Caleb started pulling rope from his saddlebag. I'll go down, see if I can get them moving. Boss, that's suicide, Dutch said. The edge could give way any second. You got a better idea? Nobody did. Caleb tied the rope around his waist, handed the other end to Dutch. You and Santos anchor me. If I go over, pull me up fast. Caleb, wait, Evelyn started. He looked at her, and his eyes were steady. I have to try. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him it wasn't worth it, that a dozen cows weren't worth his life. But she knew he wouldn't listen. This was who he was, a man who took care of what was his, no matter the cost. Be careful, she said instead. Always am. He lowered himself over the edge. Evelyn watched, her heart in her throat, as he disappeared from view. The rope went taut, Dutch and Santos bracing themselves against the weight. I'm down, Caleb's voice drifted up. Ledge is holding. The next few minutes were the longest of Evelyn's life. She could hear Caleb moving around down there, talking to the cattle in that low, calm voice he used. Then the sounds of hooves on rock. First one's coming up, he called. A cow appeared at the edge, wild-eyed and scrambling.
It found purchase, hauled itself onto solid ground. Evelyn and the men drove it away from the edge towards safety. 1 down, 11 to go. They fell into a rhythm. Caleb would get a cow moving. It would climb up. They would secure it. Slow, dangerous work, but it was working. They were on the 8th cow when Evelyn heard the crack. It was a sound like a gunshot, sharp and terrible. The rope jerked violently. Dutch and Santos were yanked forward, sliding toward the edge. "He's going over!" Santos yelled. Evelyn didn't think. She ran forward, grabbed the rope behind Dutch, threw her weight backward. The rope burned through her gloves, tore at her palms, but she held on. "Pull!" Dutch shouted. They pulled. The rope inched backward, so slowly it felt like they weren't moving at all. Evelyn's shoulders screamed, her feet slipped in the snow, but she didn't let go. Then Caleb appeared at the edge, covered in snow, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. Dutch and Santos hauled him over, and they all collapsed in a heap. For a moment, nobody moved. "Everyone alive?" Dutch finally asked. "Unfortunately," Caleb groaned. Evelyn crawled to him, put her shaking hands on his face. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Ledge gave way, but I caught myself." He sat up, winced. "Thanks for the assist. Don't ever do that again." "Can't promise that." "Caleb, I'm okay." He squeezed her hand, looked past her to where the rescued cattle were clustered. "How many did we get?" 8, Santos said. 4 more down there." Caleb pushed to his feet, swayed slightly. "Then we're not done." "The hell we're not," Dutch said. "That ledge is unstable. You go back down there, it'll kill you." "Those are my cattle. And this is my ranch too, and I'm telling you it's not worth it." Dutch stepped forward, face hard. "We got 8. That's better than losing all 12. Time to cut our losses and go home." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but then Evelyn said, "He's right." He turned to her. "You're telling me to give up?" "I'm telling you to be smart. You almost died just now. Those 4 cows aren't worth your life." "They're not just cows. I know what they are." She stood, faced him. "They're your livelihood, your responsibility, but you're no good to this ranch dead." They stared at each other, and Evelyn could see the war in his eyes. Pride versus reason, stubbornness versus sense. Finally, he looked away. "Get the 8 we saved moving. We're heading back." Relief washed through her. They started the journey home, moving slowly with the rescued cattle. The wind had picked up again, and fresh snow was starting to fall. Evelyn rode near the back of the group, keeping the stragglers moving. That's when she saw it. One of the cows they'd rescued was limping badly, falling behind. It took a few stumbling steps, then stopped, sides heaving. "Caleb," she called, "we've got a problem." He rode back, took one look at the cow, and swore. "Leg's broken. Must have happened on the ledge." "Can we get her back to the ranch?" "Not like this. She'll slow us down too much, and this storm's getting worse." He pulled his rifle from its saddle holster. "I'll have to put her down." "No." He looked at her. "Evelyn, she's suffering. Just give me a minute to think." "There's nothing to think about. It's the kindest thing." But Evelyn was already dismounting. She approached the cow slowly, ran her hands over the injured leg. It was bad, clearly broken, but the cow was young, strong otherwise. "If we splint it," she said, "if we support the leg, she might make it." "We don't have time for that." "Then make time." She looked up at him. "You were willing to risk your life for these cattle. Give me a chance to save this one." Caleb hesitated, then dismounted. "Dutch, hand me your rope." They worked together, cutting branches from a scraggly tree, binding them to the cow's leg with rope. It was crude, but it might work. The cow fought them at first, then seemed to understand they were helping. "She still can't walk on it," Caleb said. "Then we lead her. Slow, careful." "Evelyn, the storm, I know." She took the cow's halter. "But we're not leaving her." He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head with something that might have been admiration. "You're as stubborn as I am." "Worse." They started moving again, even slower now. The injured cow limped along, leaning on Evelyn's horse. The snow fell harder. The wind cut through their clothes. Evelyn's hands were numb. Her face felt frozen, and every breath burned. But she kept going. They were maybe a mile from the ranch when the cow stumbled. Evelyn tried to catch her, to keep her upright, but the animal's weight was too much. They both went down. Evelyn hitting the frozen ground hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Pain exploded in her shoulder. Evelyn? Caleb was off his horse in seconds, kneeling beside her. Don't move. The cow. Forget the cow. Are you hurt? She tried to sit up, gasped as pain lanced through her shoulder. I think I dislocated something. Caleb's face went white. Dutch, get over here. The men gathered around. Dutch took one look at Evelyn and said, We need to get her back, now. Can you ride? Caleb asked her. I can try. Not good enough. He scooped her up, ignoring her protest, and lifted her onto his horse. Then he mounted behind her, one arm around her waist, holding her against his chest. Santos, can you handle my rope line? Got it. Then let's move. They rode hard, Evelyn cradled against Caleb, his body shielding her from the wind. Every jolt sent fresh waves of pain through her shoulder, but she bit down on her lip and stayed silent. The ranch appeared through the snow like salvation. Wesley and Aaron came running out, helped get Evelyn down. Caleb carried her inside, set her carefully on the kitchen table. Someone ride for the doctor, he ordered. Storm's too bad, Dutch said. He'll never make it. Then we do it ourselves. Caleb turned to Evelyn. This is going to hurt. I know. He examined her shoulder carefully, and she could see the worry in his eyes. It's dislocated. I need to put it back in. Do it. Evelyn, just do it, Caleb. He looked at Dutch. Hold her. Dutch positioned himself behind her, hands firm on her good shoulder and her waist. Caleb took her injured arm, and Evelyn saw him steel himself. On 3. 1, 2. He didn't wait for 3. The pain was white-hot, blinding. Evelyn screamed, couldn't help it. Then there was a pop, and suddenly the pain lessened to a dull throb. Done, Caleb said, his voice shaking. It's done. Evelyn slumped against Dutch, breathing hard. Sweat dripped down her face despite the cold. Get her to bed, Caleb said. Santos, find something to make a sling. Dutch, help me with the cattle. Boss, you should rest too. I'm fine, move. The men scattered. Caleb started to follow, then stopped, came back to Evelyn. He pressed his forehead against hers just for a moment. You scared the hell out of me, he whispered. Sorry. No, you're not. No, I'm not. He almost smiled. Then he kissed her, quick and hard, and left. Santos helped her to her room, fashioned a sling from a torn sheet. Aaron brought her water, and Miller appeared with a bottle of whiskey. For the pain, he said, setting it on the bedside table. Thank you. He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. You did good out there. Really good. After they left, Evelyn lay in the darkness, listening to the storm and the sounds of the men working. Her shoulder throbbed. Her whole body ached. But underneath the pain was something else. Pride. She'd done it. She'd gone out in the storm, helped rescue the cattle, fought to save that injured cow. She'd proven, to herself more than anyone, that she was strong enough for this life. The door opened. Caleb slipped in, still in his wet clothes. You should be resting, Evelyn said. So should you. He sat on the edge of the bed. How's the shoulder? Hurts like hell. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was worth it. He reached out, brushed hair from her face. The cow didn't make it, died about an hour ago. Evelyn's chest tightened. Oh, but you tried. That matters. Does it? Yeah, it does. He took her hand carefully, avoiding the injured arm. Evelyn, what you did out there, going back for that cow, trying to save her even when it didn't make sense, that was stupid. No, it was brave. He met her eyes. It was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. Caleb, I've spent 3 years trying to hold this ranch together alone, trying to be strong enough for everything, everyone. And then you show up and you're just as stubborn, just as determined, but you're not alone. You're with me. Evelyn's throat was tight. Where's this going? I don't know. He laughed, sounded almost helpless. I just know that I can't imagine doing this without you anymore. The ranch, the work, all of it. I don't want to. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, her cheek, her mouth. Gentle, careful of her injury. Get some rest, he said. I'll check on you later. After he left, Evelyn lay in the darkness, her shoulder aching, her heart full, and realized something had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And for the first time in years, she wanted to see what came next. Her shoulder took 3 weeks to heal properly. 3 weeks of Caleb hovering, the men treating her like she might shatter, and Evelyn fighting the urge to throttle anyone who suggested she rest. She wasn't made for sitting still, never had been. But the pain kept her grounded, kept her in the house while the world outside turned from white to gray to the first hints of brown as winter slowly loosened its grip. She found ways to be useful. One-handed cooking became an art form. She reorganized the entire pantry with her good arm, cataloged supplies, rewrote schedules. Erin brought her books from town, and she read them cover to cover, hungry for something to occupy her mind. Caleb came to her room every night. Sometimes they just talked, his voice low in the darkness, telling her about the ranch, about Sarah, about the years before Evelyn arrived when everything felt like it was falling apart. Sometimes they didn't talk at all, just lay together in silence, his hand careful on her waist, avoiding the injured shoulder. They didn't discuss what was happening between them, didn't put words to it. That felt dangerous somehow, like naming it would make it real and breakable. The men knew, of course. Dutch had probably known from the beginning. But nobody said anything, and Evelyn was grateful for that small mercy. On the morning she finally took off the sling for good, she found Caleb in the barn, working on a saddle that had seen better days. "Shoulders better," she announced. He looked up, and relief washed over his face. "You sure?" "Positive. Watch." She lifted her arm above her head, rotated it. There was still some stiffness, a dull ache if she pushed too hard, but the sharp pain was gone. Caleb set down his tools, crossed to her. "You've been testing it all morning, haven't you?" "Maybe." "Evelyn? I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm ready to get back to work." He took her hand, examined her shoulder with careful fingers. "No heavy lifting. Not yet." "Caleb, I mean it. You push too hard, you'll hurt yourself again. I'm not made of glass." "I know that." His eyes met hers. "But you're also not invincible, no matter how hard you try to be." She wanted to argue, but he was right. The fall had scared her more than she wanted to admit. Not the pain, but the helplessness. The weeks of depending on others when she'd spent so long proving she could depend on herself. "Fine," she said. "No heavy lifting. For now." "Thank you." He kissed her then, right there in the barn, not caring if anyone saw. When they broke apart, Evelyn was breathless. "We should probably talk," she said, "about this." "What's there to talk about?" "What we are. What we're doing." Caleb leaned against the workbench, pulled her to stand between his knees. "What do you want us to be?" "I don't know. I just know that sneaking around feels wrong." "What, you want me to announce it at dinner? By the way, everyone, Evelyn and I are together now. Pass the potatoes?" She laughed despite herself. "Not exactly." "Then what?" She struggled to find the words. "I don't want to hide. I don't want to be your secret." "You're not." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "But this is a small ranch in a small town, and people already talk. I don't want to make things harder for you." "Let them talk." "Easy to say." "I mean it." She looked at him steadily. "I'm not ashamed of this. Of us. Are you?" "No, never." "Then we don't hide." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. No more hiding." That night at dinner, Caleb sat beside her instead of at the head of the table. A small thing, but the men noticed. Dutch caught her eye and smiled. Santos nodded slightly. Even Miller looked pleased, which was a first. After the meal, as Evelyn cleared plates, Wesley spoke up. "Miss Evelyn, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "You planning on staying? Long term, I mean?" The kitchen went quiet. All eyes turned to her. Evelyn set down the plate she was holding. "I wasn't planning on going anywhere." "Good," Wesley grinned, "because this place runs a hell of a lot better with you in it." "Language," she said automatically, but she was smiling. "Sorry, ma'am, but it's true." The others murmured agreement. Jim raised his coffee cup in a small toast. Santos said something about the best biscuits he'd ever had. Erin just beamed at her like she'd hung the moon. Caleb's hand found hers under the table, squeezed once. Later, on the porch, he said, "They love you, you know. They love my cooking. It's more than that. You gave them back something they didn't know they were missing. Order, stability, a home instead of just a place to work." Evelyn looked out at the dark plains. "I gave myself those things too." "I know." They stood in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the clear sky. "Caleb," Evelyn said eventually, "what happens when spring comes? When the work picks up and you need to hire more men?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, how do we explain this? Us? Do we tell them I'm the housekeeper? Do we say I'm something more? Do we tell them the truth," he interrupted, "that you run this household and you're with me. Anyone who has a problem with that can find work elsewhere." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple." He turned to face her. "Evelyn, I'm not going to pretend you're less than what you are. Not to make anyone comfortable, not to avoid gossip. You stood in a blizzard and tried to save a dying cow. You dislocated your shoulder and didn't complain once. You're the strongest person I know, and I'll be damned if I hide that." Her throat went tight. "You really mean that? Every word?" She kissed him, deep and sure, pouring everything she couldn't say into the press of her mouth against his. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Caleb said, "Marry me." Evelyn froze. "What?" "Marry me." He took her hands. "I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take it slow, but I don't care. I want you here, permanently. Not as my housekeeper, not as some arrangement, as my wife." "Caleb, we can't." "Why not?" "Because—" She struggled to find a reason that didn't sound like fear. "Because people will talk. They'll say I trapped you, that I'm too old, that you're settling. Let them say whatever they want. It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." He pulled her closer. "Evelyn, I love you. I should have said it weeks ago, but I'm saying it now. I love you, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making sure you know it." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You love me?" "Yeah." "That's insane." "Probably. We barely know each other." "I know enough. I know you're brave and stubborn, and you make terrible coffee when you're distracted. I know you hum when you cook and you can't sleep during storms. I know you walked across Wyoming alone because you refused to let anyone control you. I know you're exactly the kind of crazy I need in my life." Evelyn laughed, but it came out more like a sob. "This is the worst proposal I've ever heard." "Is that a no?" "I didn't say that." "So what are you saying?" She looked at him, this man who'd taken her in when she had nothing, who'd given her work and respect and something that felt dangerously close to home, who'd fallen off a ledge trying to save his cattle and then held her while her shoulder healed. Who was standing here now, asking her to stay forever? "I'm saying yes," she whispered, "but on one condition." "Name it." "We wait until spring. Give people time to adjust to me being here before we drop another surprise on them." "I don't care what people think. I know. But I do." She touched his face. "I want to do this right. I want to marry you without shadows hanging over us. Can you give me that?" He thought about it, then nodded. "Spring, but the second the snow melts, we're going to town and making this official." "Deal." He kissed her again, and Evelyn let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. The next few weeks were strange and wonderful. Evelyn wore no ring, there was no announcement, but something had shifted. The men treated her differently, with a kind of deference that had nothing to do with her being the housekeeper. Caleb was less careful about touching her in front of others, his hand on her back as he passed, a kiss on her temple when he thought nobody was looking. Dutch cornered her one morning while she was hanging laundry. "He asked you, didn't he?" Evelyn didn't bother pretending not to understand. "Yes." "And you said yes." "I did." Dutch nodded slowly. "Good. That's good." He paused. "Sarah was a fine woman, but she was never strong enough for this life. You are. That's not fair to her." "Maybe not, but it's true." He met her eyes. Sarah needed taking care of. You don't. That's what Caleb needs, someone who can stand beside him, not behind him. I hope you're right. I am. You'll see. But not everyone was as accepting. 2 weeks before spring officially arrived, a rider came to the ranch. A well-dressed man on a fine horse, carrying himself with the kind of authority that came from money and position. Evelyn was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion outside. Through the window, she saw Caleb talking to the stranger, their conversation growing heated. Then Caleb's face went hard, and he pointed toward the house. The stranger's eyes followed the gesture, landing on Evelyn. Her blood ran cold. She knew that face. Thomas Hewitt, her late husband's brother, the man she'd run from. Caleb came into the kitchen, his expression tight. "We need to talk." "Who is he?" "Says his name is Thomas Hewitt. Says he's looking for his sister-in-law who disappeared 3 months ago. Says he's worried about her welfare." Caleb's eyes were hard. "That you, Evelyn?" She sank into a chair. "Yes." "You want to tell me what this is about?" So she did. All of it. The arranged marriage Thomas had tried to force on her after her husband died. The locked doors and constant surveillance. The threats when she refused. The night she'd climbed out the window and run. Caleb listened without interrupting, his jaw getting tighter with every word. When she finished, he said, "He wants you to come back." "I'm not going." "I told him that. He said he has legal claim to you as your late husband's family." "That's not how it works." "Might be, depending on the marriage contract. If your husband's family has guardianship rights." He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know the law well enough." "So what do we do?" "We fight." He knelt in front of her, took her hands. "Evelyn, I'm not letting him take you. I don't care what legal claim he thinks he has." "Caleb, if the law is on his side, then we'll change the law, or break it. I don't care." His grip tightened. "You're not going back there. Not now, not ever." A knock at the door made them both turn. Thomas Hewitt stood in the doorway, his expression cold. "Mrs. Evelyn," he said, "or should I say, my dear sister-in-law, what a relief to find you safe." "Mr. Hewitt." Evelyn stood, keeping her voice steady. "I'm surprised to see you here. I've been searching for months. When you disappeared, we were all so worried. Anything could have happened to you." His eyes swept the kitchen, taking in the simple furnishings, the work-worn counters. "And to find you here, living in such rustic conditions, working as a servant, no less." "I'm not a servant. I'm the household manager." "Of course. How fortunate that Mr. Boone was kind enough to take you in." His smile was sharp. "But you must know this can't continue. You have a place with your family. A proper home, proper prospects. It's time to come back where you belong." "This is where I belong." "Evelyn, please be reasonable. You can't stay here indefinitely. What kind of life is this for a woman of your standing?" "A life I chose." Thomas's expression hardened. "You're not thinking clearly. 3 months alone, suffering through who knows what hardships. It's affected your judgment. But don't worry, I'm here now. I'll take you home, and we'll forget this unfortunate episode." "She's not going anywhere," Caleb said quietly. Thomas turned to him. "With all due respect, Mr. Boone, this is a family matter. It doesn't concern you." "She's staying here. That makes it my concern." "I'm afraid the law sees it differently. As the senior male member of her late husband's family, I have certain rights." "I don't give a damn about your rights." "Caleb," Evelyn said softly. "Don't." But he was already stepping forward, putting himself between her and Thomas. "Let me make this clear, Hewitt. Evelyn stays here because she wants to. If you try to force her to leave, you'll have to go through me." Thomas looked him up and down, unimpressed. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." "I see." Thomas's smile turned cruel. How noble. The lonely rancher playing protector to a desperate widow. "Tell me, Mr. Boone, what exactly is the nature of your relationship with my sister-in-law?" The implication hung in the air like poison. "That's none of your business," Evelyn said. "On the contrary, it's very much my business. If you're living here in sin, that changes everything. The courts won't look kindly on a woman who's abandoned her family responsibilities to shack up with—" Caleb moved so fast Thomas didn't have time to react. One moment he was smirking, the next he was against the wall, Caleb's forearm across his throat. "Choose your next words very carefully," Caleb said, his voice deadly calm. "Caleb, let him go," Evelyn said. "He's not worth it." For a long moment, Caleb didn't move. Then he stepped back, releasing Thomas. Thomas straightened his jacket, his face red. "That was assault. I could have you arrested. Try it. See what happens. This isn't over. I'll be back with the proper authorities, and we'll see what they have to say about this arrangement." Thomas looked at Evelyn. "You have until tomorrow to come to your senses. After that, I'm involving the law." He left, and the silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn sank back into her chair, shaking. "This is bad." "It'll be fine." "No, it won't. If he goes to the authorities, if he has legal claim." She looked up at Caleb. "I can't let you risk everything for me." "Too late. Already doing it." "Caleb." "Evelyn, listen to me." He crouched in front of her again. "I told you I'd fight for you. I meant it. Whatever comes, we'll face it together. What if we can't win? Then we'll run. Take the horses, head west, start over somewhere new. You can't leave the ranch. Watch me." His eyes were fierce. "This place is just land and buildings. You're what matters. If I have to choose between the ranch and you, I choose you. Every time." Tears burned in her eyes. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Yeah, well, you make me stupid." She laughed, watery and broken, and pulled him close. That night, Caleb called a meeting with all the ranch hands. They gathered in the main room, their faces grave. "Some of you probably saw the visitor we had today," Caleb began. "His name is Thomas Hewitt, and he's here to take Evelyn back to his family." The men stirred, muttering. "She doesn't want to go," Caleb continued, "and I don't want her to go. But Hewitt's claiming he has legal rights, and he's threatening to involve the authorities." "That's bullshit," Miller said. "Probably. But it might not matter if he's got the law on his side." Caleb looked around at his men. "I'm not going to lie to you. This could get messy. If it comes down to it, I'm prepared to fight. But I won't ask any of you to risk your jobs or your freedom for my sake. If you want to leave before things get complicated, I understand." Nobody moved. Dutch stood. "Boss, with all due respect, that's the dumbest thing you've ever said." "Dutch, Miss Evelyn is one of us now. You think we're going to stand by and let some fancy city man drag her off against her will? Not happening." The others nodded, a chorus of agreement. Santos stood next. "We stand with you, both of you." Jim and Wesley followed. "Whatever you need." Miller was the last to rise. "I wasn't exactly welcoming when Miss Evelyn first got here, but she proved herself 10 times over. She stays." Evelyn's vision blurred. "You don't have to do this." "Yeah, we do," Aaron said. "Your family." The word hit her square in the chest. Family. These rough, weather-beaten men who'd been strangers 3 months ago were calling her family. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you." "So what's the plan?" Dutch asked Caleb. "First, we make sure Evelyn's protected. Nobody goes anywhere alone. We work in pairs, and someone's always at the house." Caleb's expression was hard. "Second, I ride to town tomorrow and talk to the sheriff. See if Hewitt actually has legal standing or if he's just blowing smoke. And if he does have standing, then we get creative." The meeting broke up, but the men lingered, offering quiet words of support to Evelyn as they passed. When they were finally alone, she turned to Caleb. "Thank you." "For what?" "For believing me. For fighting for me. For—" She gestured helplessly. "Everything." He pulled her close. "You're worth fighting for." "I don't feel like it." "That's because you've been told you're not for too long. But you are, and I'm going to keep telling you until you believe it." She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and wood smoke and something indefinably Caleb. "What if we lose?" she whispered. "We won't. But what if we do?" "Then we run. Like I said, we take the horses and we go somewhere he can't find us. Canada, maybe, or Mexico." "You'd really leave all this?" "In a heartbeat." He kissed the top of her head. "Evelyn, I spent 3 years building this ranch back up after Sarah died. 3 years of nothing but work, trying to fill the emptiness. And then you showed up, and suddenly the ranch wasn't enough anymore. You are. She looked up at him. I love you. It was the first time she'd said it out loud. His expression softened. Say it again. I love you, you stubborn, impossible man. He kissed her, deep and thorough, and Evelyn let herself forget about Thomas Hewitt and legal claims and everything else. Just for a moment, there was only this, the two of them together, and the promise of a future worth fighting for. The next morning, Caleb rode to town with Dutch and Santos as backup. Evelyn stayed at the ranch, trying to work, trying to keep busy, but mostly just watching the road. They returned at sunset, and Caleb's expression told her everything she needed to know before he said a word. What did the sheriff say? He says Hewitt's contract is legitimate. According to the terms of your marriage, if your husband died without children, guardianship of you reverts to his family. Caleb's voice was tight. Legally, he can compel you to return. That's insane. That's the law, at least according to the sheriff. Evelyn sank into a chair. So that's it. I have to go back. No. Caleb pulled up a chair beside her. There's one loophole. What? If you remarry, once you have a new husband, the old contract is void. Understanding dawned. Spring. You said we'd wait until spring. Forget spring. We go to town tomorrow, get married at the courthouse. Hewitt shows up with his legal papers. We show him a marriage certificate. End of story. Caleb, we can't get married just to avoid a legal technicality. Why not? Because that's not how it should be. Marriage should be about love, about choosing each other, not about escaping someone. I am choosing you. I chose you the day you showed up at my door. This just makes it official a few weeks early. What if you regret it? I won't. You don't know that. Evelyn. He took her hands. I asked you to marry me before Hewitt showed up. This doesn't change anything except the timing. I want you as my wife. Not to save you from him, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe this could work. Okay, she said finally. Okay, we'll do it. Relief washed over his face. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. He pulled her close, held her tight. I promise you won't regret this. I better not, or I'm poisoning your coffee. He laughed, and some of the tension broke. That night, Evelyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow she'd become Evelyn Boone, wife to a man she'd known for 3 months, partner in a ranch she'd stumbled onto by accident. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt right. Like everything that had come before, the walking, the running, the weeks of survival had been leading to this. Not an ending, but a beginning. She fell asleep with Caleb's arm around her waist and woke to pale sunlight streaming through the window. Her wedding day. They left for town at sunrise, all 7 of them. Caleb drove the wagon with Evelyn beside him, and the ranch hands rode alongside like an honor guard. Or a small army. Evelyn wasn't sure which. She'd put on her best dress, the one she'd been saving for some undefined future occasion. It was plain, dark blue cotton, but it was clean and mended, and it fit her properly. Dutch's wife had died years ago, but he'd kept some of her things, and he'd offered Evelyn a shawl, cream-colored wool with delicate embroidery along the edges. She wore it now, wrapped around her shoulders against the morning chill. You look beautiful, Caleb said quietly. I look like a housekeeper going to town. You look like my wife. The word still felt strange. Wife. She'd been a wife before, to a man she'd loved and lost. But this felt different. That marriage had been about youth and hope and a future that got stolen away. This one was about survival and strength and 2 broken people choosing to be whole together. The ride to town took 2 hours. Nobody talked much. There wasn't much to say. They all knew what was at stake. When they reached the main street, Evelyn's stomach dropped. Thomas Hewitt was already there, standing outside the courthouse with 2 men she didn't recognize. One wore a badge, the other looked like a lawyer, all expensive suit and cold eyes. He brought backup, Miller muttered. So did we, Caleb said evenly. They pulled up in front of the courthouse, and Caleb helped Evelyn down from the wagon. His hand was steady, but she could feel the tension in him, coiled tight like a spring ready to snap. Thomas stepped forward, his expression smug. "Evelyn, Mr. Boone, what a surprise to see you here." "No, it's not," Caleb said. "You knew we'd come." "Did I? How presumptuous." Thomas gestured to the man with the badge. "This is Sheriff Morrison, and this is Mr. Blackwood, my attorney. We've come to settle this matter legally and peacefully." "There's nothing to settle," Evelyn said. "I'm not going with you." "I'm afraid that's not your decision to make." Blackwood stepped forward, pulling papers from his coat. "Mrs. Evelyn Carter, according to the terms of your marriage contract with the late Robert Carter, guardianship of your person reverts to his family in the event of his death without issue. Mr. Thomas Hewitt, as senior male relative, is your legal guardian and has the right to determine your residence and circumstances." "That's ridiculous," Dutch said. "She's a grown woman." "The law disagrees," and Blackwood's smile was thin. "Mrs. Carter, you have two choices. Come willingly with Mr. Hewitt, or the sheriff will compel you." Sheriff Morrison looked uncomfortable but nodded. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the law is the law." Evelyn's hands were shaking. This couldn't be happening. She'd walked across Wyoming, survived blizzards, rebuilt her entire life. She couldn't go back now. "There's a third option," Caleb said. Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "She's not Mrs. Carter anymore. Or she won't be in about 10 minutes. Caleb turned to the sheriff. "We're here to get married. Once that's done, your guardianship contract is void." Thomas's face went red. "You can't be serious. Dead serious. This is a farce, a desperate ploy to circumvent legitimate legal—" "It's perfectly legal," Caleb interrupted. "Sheriff, is there any law against us getting married?" Morrison looked between them, clearly torn. "Well, no, not if you're both willing parties." "We are." "This is absurd." Thomas turned to the sheriff. "You can't allow this. This man is taking advantage of a vulnerable woman." "I'm standing right here," Evelyn said coldly. "And I'm not vulnerable. I'm choosing to marry Mr. Boone of my own free will." "Your judgment is compromised. 3 months of hardship, living in squalor. I live in a ranch house, not squalor, and my judgment is fine." "Evelyn, please." Thomas's tone shifted, became almost pleading. "Think about what you're doing. You'll be tied to this man, this place. What kind of life is that? Come back with me. I can offer you comfort, security." "A locked room and no choices," she finished. "I know what you're offering, Thomas. I ran away from it once. I'll do it again if I have to." "You ungrateful—" "Careful," Caleb said quietly. "You're talking to my future wife." Thomas's eyes blazed. "Sheriff, I demand you stop this." Morrison rubbed his face tiredly. "Mr. Hewitt, I can't stop two people from getting married. That's not how this works." "Then I'll contest it. I'll claim he coerced her, that she's not of sound mind." "Go ahead," Caleb said. "We'll be married either way. You can spend your money on lawyers all you want. Won't change the outcome." For a moment, Thomas looked like he might actually attack Caleb. His fists clenched, his face went purple, and Evelyn saw real rage burning in his eyes. Then Blackwood put a hand on his arm. "Thomas, it's over. If they marry, the contract is void. There's nothing we can do." "I won't accept this." "You don't have a choice." The lawyer's voice was firm. "Let it go." Thomas jerked his arm away. "This isn't over, Evelyn. You think you can just run away and play house and everything will be fine? You're making a mistake." "Then it's my mistake to make," she said. "You'll regret this." "I doubt it." He stared at her, and she stared back, refusing to flinch. Finally, he turned on his heel and stalked away, Blackwood hurrying after him. The sheriff watched them go, then turned back to Caleb and Evelyn. "You two really want to do this?" "Yes," they said in unison. Morrison sighed. "All right, let's get you married then." The ceremony was brief, almost perfunctory. They stood in the courthouse office, surrounded by the ranch hands, while a tired-looking clerk read the legal language. Caleb held Evelyn's hand, his grip steady and sure. When the clerk asked if she took Caleb to be her husband, she said yes without hesitation. When he asked Caleb the same question, his voice was strong and clear. "I do." Then by the power vested in me by the state of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Caleb turned to her, and there was something soft and wondering in his eyes. He cupped her face gently, kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. When they broke apart, the ranch hands erupted in cheers. Dutch clapped Caleb on the back so hard he stumbled. Santos shook Evelyn's hand solemnly. Miller and the others offered congratulations, and Aaron looked like he might cry. "Well, Mrs. Boone," Caleb said, "what do you think?" "I think we just got married in a courthouse with no flowers, no music, and no cake." "We can fix the cake part. There's a bakery down the street." She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "Then let's get cake." They spent the rest of the day in town, a strange celebratory limbo. The bakery provided a small cake, which they ate in the general store while Mrs. Henderson looked on with pursed lips but didn't say anything. Dutch bought a round of drinks at the saloon, though Evelyn declined. The men got progressively louder and happier as the afternoon wore on, and by the time they loaded back into the wagon for the ride home, everyone was in high spirits. Everyone except Evelyn. She sat beside Caleb, his arm around her shoulders, and tried to feel the joy she knew she should be feeling. She was married. She was safe. Thomas couldn't touch her now, but something felt unfinished. "You're quiet," Caleb said as they neared the ranch. "Just thinking." "About?" "About how we just got married to avoid a legal technicality. About how we barely know each other. About how this could all fall apart." He was silent for a moment. "You having second thoughts?" "No, maybe. I don't know." She looked at him. "Are you?" "Not even a little bit." He pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her fully. "Evelyn, I know this happened fast. I know it's not how either of us planned, but I meant every word I said in there. I want you as my wife. Not because of Hewitt, not because of some contract, because you're the strongest, bravest, most stubborn woman I've ever met, and I can't imagine my life without you." "Caleb, let me finish. I know I'm not easy. I know this place is hard, that the work is brutal, that winters are hell. I know I'm older and set in my ways and probably impossible to live with, but I will spend every day for the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." Tears burned in her eyes. "You're already worthy, you idiot. Then why do you look so sad?" "Because I'm scared. Because I've been alone for so long that I don't know how to not be alone anymore. Because what if I'm terrible at this? What if I fail at being your wife?" "You won't. You don't know that." "I do." He wiped a tear from her cheek. "Evelyn, you survived things that would have killed most people. You walked across Wyoming alone. You built a home out of nothing. If you can do all that, you can figure out how to be married to me." She laughed wetly. "When you put it that way. It's the only way I know how to put it." He kissed her forehead. "Come on. Let's go home." Home. The word settled something in her chest. They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting everything gold and orange. The men helped unload, then discreetly made themselves scarce, heading to the bunkhouse with knowing grins. Caleb carried Evelyn over the threshold, even though she protested that it was ridiculous. "Humor me," he said. "It's tradition." "Since when do you care about tradition?" "Since I married you." He set her down in the kitchen, and they stood there in the fading light, suddenly awkward. "So," Evelyn said, "we're married." "Yep." "Now what?" "Now—" He pulled her closer. "Now we figure it out. Together." She kissed him, and it felt different than before. Less desperate, more sure. A promise instead of a question. They made their way to his room, their room now, and in the darkness, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe this could work, that maybe two broken people could build something whole. The next morning, she woke tangled in Caleb's arms, sunlight streaming through the window. For a moment, she just lay there, listening to him breathe, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. Then reality crashed back. She was married. She was Mrs. Boone now. This was her life. Terror and joy warred in her chest. Caleb stirred, opened his eyes. "Morning. Morning. You sleep okay?" "Better than I have in years." He smiled, kissed her shoulder. "Good." They stayed in bed longer than they should have, talking quietly. learning the new shape of their life. Eventually, hunger drove them to the kitchen, where they made breakfast together in comfortable silence. The men filtered in one by one, all of them grinning like idiots. Dutch made a comment about newlyweds and sleep, which made Evelyn blush, and Caleb throw a biscuit at him. It felt normal. Right. After breakfast, Caleb went out to check on the cattle, and Evelyn started her usual rounds. The house needed cleaning, supplies needed organizing, there was mending to do. The work was familiar, grounding. She was beating dust from a rug on the back porch when she heard a horse approaching. Her stomach dropped. Thomas Hewitt rode up alone, looking haggard and furious. Evelyn set down the rug beater, crossed her arms. "You need to leave." "I just want to talk." "There's nothing to talk about." He dismounted, took a step toward her. "Evelyn, please. 5 minutes." "Thomas, I know I can't force you to come back. I know the marriage voided the contract. I'm not here about that." She hesitated. "Then what are you here about?" "Closure, maybe. Understanding." He looked older suddenly, tired. "You were my brother's wife. You were family, and you just disappeared. No note, no explanation. Do you have any idea what that did to us? To me?" Guilt twisted in her stomach. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't stay. You have to understand that." "Why? Because I wanted you to remarry? Because I thought you deserved security and a proper home?" "Because you wanted to control me." The words burst out of her. "You locked me in that house, Thomas. You monitored every letter, every visitor. You picked out a husband for me like I was property to be managed." "I was protecting you." "From what?" "From living my own life, from making my own choices, from making mistakes," he gestured around. "And look where those choices led. You're married to a rancher you barely know, living in the middle of nowhere, working yourself to death. I'm happy." The words stopped him cold. "What?" "I'm happy," she repeated, and realized it was true. "For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. I wake up every morning with purpose. I have work that matters, people who respect me, a husband who treats me like an equal. That's more than I ever had with you." Thomas's face crumpled. "I loved you, you know. After Robert died, I thought maybe eventually you could see me as more than just his brother." Evelyn's anger drained away, replaced by something like pity. "Thomas, I never gave you any indication." I know you didn't, but I hoped anyway." He laughed bitterly. "Pathetic, isn't it? It's human. I'm sorry for all of it. For trying to control you, for following you here, for making this harder than it had to be." He met her eyes. "I just wanted you to be safe." "I am safe, just not in the way you imagined." He nodded slowly, then walked back to his horse. Before mounting, he turned back. "Be happy, Evelyn. That's all I ever really wanted for you." "I will. I am." She watched him ride away, and something heavy lifted from her chest. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly, but it was understanding, and maybe that was enough. Caleb appeared from around the barn. "Everything okay?" "Yeah, it's over. Really over." He pulled her close, and they stood there watching the dust settle on the road. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Evelyn was wife now, instead of just housekeeper. But the work didn't change much. She still ran the household, still managed supplies and schedules. But there were differences. The way Caleb consulted her on ranch decisions. The way the men deferred to her not just on domestic matters, but on everything. The way she had a voice in how things were run. She liked it. Spring came in earnest, turning the plains green and bringing new challenges. They hired 2 more hands to help with the increased work, young men who accepted Evelyn's authority without question. The cattle thrived, the ranch prospered, and Evelyn found something she hadn't expected. She found herself thinking about teaching again. It started small. Aaron asked her to help him with his reading one evening, and she discovered he could barely get through a simple passage. When she asked if any of the others had similar struggles, half the crew admitted they couldn't read at all. "Never had the opportunity to learn," Dutch said with a shrug. "My folks couldn't read either, so they couldn't teach me." "Would you want to learn?" Evelyn asked. "If someone was willing to teach you?" The looks on their faces were answer enough. So she started holding lessons in the evenings after dinner. Simple stuff at first, letters and sounds, basic words. But the men were hungry for it, eager to learn. Even Miller, who'd been so resistant at first, showed up every night with his slate and chalk. Caleb watched from the doorway one evening, a small smile on his face. "What?" Evelyn asked when she noticed him. "Nothing, just you're good at this." At teaching? At giving people something they didn't know they needed. She felt a spark of something that had been dormant for years. Purpose beyond survival. A future that looked like more than just getting through each day. "Caleb," she said later that night, as they lay in bed, "do you think there are other people around here who might want to learn? Not just the hands, but families in town, children?" "Probably. Why?" "I've been thinking about teaching, really teaching, not just evening lessons. Maybe opening a small school." He propped himself up on one elbow, looking at her. "You want to start a school? Is that crazy?" "No, it's brilliant." He kissed her. "When do we start?" They spent the next month planning. Caleb converted an unused outbuilding into a classroom, building desks and benches with his own hands. Evelyn rode to town, talked to families, spread the word. The response was overwhelming. Parents who'd never had the chance to educate their children jumped at the opportunity. When the school opened in late spring, 12 children showed up on the first day. By the end of the first week, there were 20. Evelyn stood at the front of the small classroom looking at their eager faces and felt something shift inside her. This was what she was meant to do. Not just survive, not just manage a household, but help shape minds, give opportunities, make a difference. "Who can tell me what this letter is?" she asked, pointing to an A written on the slate. A forest of hands shot up. She smiled and called on a little girl in the front row. The months passed. Summer came, hot and dry. They worked hard, all of them, but there was joy in it now. The ranch prospered, the school grew. Evelyn and Caleb fell into the comfortable rhythm of long married couples, though they'd only been together for months. One evening in early fall, Evelyn stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the plains. The same plains she'd crossed on foot less than a year ago, desperate and alone. Caleb joined her, handed her a cup of coffee. "What are you thinking about?" "About how far I've come, literally and figuratively." "Any regrets?" She thought about it honestly, about the walking, the fear, the uncertainty, about the rushed wedding and the hard work and the struggles. "Not a single one." "Good." He put his arm around her. "Because I'm not letting you go now." Possessive. "Damn right." She leaned into him, and they stood together in the fading light. 2 years later, the school had grown to 40 students, and Evelyn had hired an assistant teacher, a young woman from town with more education than sense, but enough heart to make up for it. The ranch was thriving, turning profit for the first time in 5 years. They'd bought the adjacent property, expanded the herd, built a new barn, and Evelyn had never been happier. She stood in her classroom on the last day before winter break, watching her students file out with promises to practice their reading over the holidays. The older ones would help teach the younger ones, passing on what they'd learned. The thought made her smile. "Mrs. Boone?" One of the older girls lingered. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, Sarah." "How did you know that this was what you were supposed to do?" Evelyn thought about it. "I didn't, not really. I just knew I wanted to do something that mattered, something that made a difference." "But you're just a teacher." "Just a teacher?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "Sarah, teachers shape the future. Every person in this room will go on to do something with their lives, and the foundation for that starts here. That's not just anything." The girl's face lit up. "I want to be a teacher too someday." "Then you should be. Work hard, keep learning, and don't let anyone tell you you can't." After Sarah left, Evelyn tidied the classroom, banking the fire, organizing supplies for next term. Through the window, she could see Caleb waiting with the wagon to take her home. Home. The word still made her smile. She locked the schoolhouse door and walked to the wagon. Caleb helped her up, and they started the familiar drive back to the ranch. "Good day?" he asked. "Great day. Sarah wants to be a teacher." "Takes after you." "Maybe." They rode in comfortable silence for a while. "Evelyn," Caleb said eventually, I've been thinking. About? About how, when you first showed up, I thought I was doing you a favor, giving you work, giving you a place to stay. You were. No. You gave me more than I ever gave you. You gave me back my life, my home, my purpose. He looked at her. You gave me you. Her throat tightened. Caleb, I'm not done. I just want you to know that marrying you is the best decision I ever made. Not because of Hewitt, not because of circumstances. Because you're you, strong and stubborn and impossible and perfect. I'm not perfect. You're perfect for me. That's what counts. She kissed him right there on the wagon seat, not caring who might see. When they pulled up to the ranch, the men were gathered outside, all of them grinning. What's going on? Evelyn asked. We got you something, Dutch said, for your anniversary. Our anniversary isn't for another 2 months. We know, but we wanted to give this to you now. They led her to the schoolhouse, not the old outbuilding, but a new structure they'd apparently been building in secret. It was bigger, better built, with real windows and a proper chimney and enough room for 60 students. Evelyn stood staring at it, tears streaming down her face. You built this? We all pitched in, Santos said. Figured you'd need more space soon. Plus the old building was drafty, Miller added. Can't have you freezing while you're trying to teach. She turned to Caleb. Did you know about this? I may have helped with the planning. She threw her arms around him, then went to each of the men, hugging them despite their embarrassed protests. Thank you, all of you. This is incredible. You earned it, Dutch said simply. Everything you've done for us, for this ranch, for those kids, this is the least we could do. That night, lying in bed, Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought her here. The walking, the fear, the desperate search for something better. She'd been looking for work, for survival, for a place where she could be safe. She'd found so much more. She'd found a home, a family, a purpose, a man who loved her not despite her strength, but because of it. She'd found herself. You asleep? Caleb asked quietly. No, just thinking. About? About how I spent most of my life being told I wasn't enough, wasn't young enough, wasn't soft enough, wasn't obedient enough. And then I found a place where being exactly who I am is not just acceptable, but valued. You're more than valued, Evelyn. You're essential. She turned to face him in the darkness. I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Why does it scare you? Because I finally have something worth losing. Then we'll just have to make sure we don't lose it. He pulled her closer. We've survived blizzards and legal battles and me falling off a ledge. I think we can handle whatever comes next. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, but it's worth it. You're worth it. They fell asleep tangled together, and Evelyn dreamed of the future, of watching her students grow and succeed, of growing old with Caleb on this ranch, of a life built not on what she'd escaped from, but on what she'd built for herself. Years passed. The school flourished, eventually becoming the largest in the county. Evelyn's students went on to become teachers themselves, doctors, lawyers, ranchers. She watched them grow with pride, knowing she'd had a hand in shaping their futures. The ranch prospered too. Caleb and Evelyn became pillars of the community, respected and admired. The whispers that had followed Evelyn in those early days faded into memory. On their 10th anniversary, they stood on the porch watching the sunset, just like they had so many times before. Any regrets? Caleb asked, echoing a question from years earlier. Not a one, Evelyn said. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner, she laughed. We found each other at exactly the right time. Any sooner and we wouldn't have been ready. Maybe. Or maybe I've been ready my whole life and just didn't know it. Romantic. I have my moments. They stood together as darkness fell, comfortable in the silence. Dutch had retired the year before, living in a small house on the property. Santos ran the day-to-day operations now, with Miller as his second. The young men they'd hired had grown into skilled ranchers, and the cycle continued. The school now had 3 teachers and over 100 students. Evelyn had trained each of those teachers herself, passing on not just knowledge, but philosophy. Education wasn't about memorization or discipline. It was about opening minds, about giving people tools to build their own futures. Mrs. Boone? Aaron appeared on the porch. He was a man now, engaged to be married, but he still called her Mrs. Boone with that same reverence he'd had as a young ranch hand. Yes, Aaron? Just wanted to let you know, my fiancé and I, we've decided. When we have children, we want them to learn from you, to have the same opportunities you gave me. Evelyn's eyes misted. I'd be honored. After he left, Caleb squeezed her hand. Still making a difference. Trying to? Succeeding. Always succeeding. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and they watched the stars come out. This was her life now. Not the life she'd imagined when she was 23 and newly married. Not the life she'd feared when she was climbing out that window and running. But a life she'd built with her own hands, her own choices, her own strength. A life that was entirely, completely, perfectly hers. And as she stood there with Caleb's arm around her, with the ranch spread out before them and the school standing solid against the night sky, Evelyn Carter Boone understood something fundamental. She hadn't been rescued. She'd rescued herself. Everything else, the ranch, Caleb, the school, the community, that was just what happened when a woman refused to accept the limitations others placed on her. When she walked until her feet bled, worked until her hands cracked, fought until there was nothing left to fight. When she chose to live instead of just survive. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of prairie grass and possibility. Caleb kissed her temple. Ready to go inside? In a minute. I just want to stand here a little longer. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. And he didn't. He stood beside her, solid and sure, as the night deepened and the world settled into quiet. Evelyn smiled. She was 47 years old. She was a teacher, a wife, a pillar of her community. She'd walked across Wyoming with nothing and built an empire out of sheer determination. And she wasn't done yet, not by a long shot.